Welterweight set to bang in Salt Lake City. I bet some of the folks there won't like what I just said, but it is what it is. We have the problem. Trevin Giles taking on Marretinha, Gabriel Bonfim, the undefeated Bonfim, the good Bonfim, the best Bonfim.
I think they're both pretty good, though.
Gabriel Bonfim, the only one that's undefeated at this point, especially in the UFC. He came in with a lot of fanfare. He beat Trey Waters on Contender Series, and that's a win that holds a lot of weight because Waters ended up coming into the UFC afterwards and beating Josh Quinlan. So for Bonfim, he gets that win by Von Flue, caught in the guillotine, then he gets it into that Von Prue position, and his last time out against Munir Lazzez, he just threw caution to the wind, walked him down, marched him forward. He ended up getting the big-time win there against Lazzez, and we touched a lot on Bonfim coming into the UFC. Let's throw it on over to a clip about Gabriel Bonfim. For Gabriel Bonfim, what got him to the dance, it's definitely his boxing, and his brother has a boxing record, and so does Gabriel, but for Gabriel, he was a Brazilian super welterweight champion. And that does kind of account for something. And he was able to get a 5-0 record there. But if you do consider for a guy like Gabriel Bonfim, boxing from the outside, he is very well-rounded as well. An undefeated, squeaky clean record. He also happens to be an LFA welterweight champ. Now, LFA's kind of given that welterweight rub to some guys that you might go, Nacon Mendonça? Like the guy that's over with Bellator? Huh? Or Carlos Leal that ended up over with the PFL. But for Bonfim, he was able to get that before he went on Contender Series last year. Derek Krantz also happened to be a welterweight champ over with the LFA. And it didn't work out in the UFC. But for Gabriel Bonfim, Matt, I know we're both excited about him. Yeah. But I don't want to just prop up Bonfim too much to take away the shine from Lazzez because both these guys on the outside are very, very accomplished strikers in MMA.
If Bonfim can throw in combination, and that's really going to be the key too, I think he's going to have to really mix in his combinations because if you go single shot for a single shot, Munir Lazzez is a big guy for this division. I know they're both listed at 6'1", but Lazzez has a very big frame and he has big legs too. And I know he was on the receiving end of some kicks against Alves, but I do think that at that range he can have some success with some of his longer range strikes. But if Bonfim backs him up between those two black lines, which is a position that a lot of guys do struggle with, like, okay, Dustin Poirier can fight behind there. Conor McGregor could in his prime, but there's a handful of fighters that can really excel on the back foot. I think Bonfim can have a lot of success if he can push Lazzez back, but that's going to be the really interesting thing because if he can't throw in combination to get Lazzez's respect, it's going to be really difficult for him to push Lazzez back.
And it's kind of tough because with both of these guys, I think striking defense-wise for a couple of guys that are primary strikers, Munir Lazzez actually does a better job at open distance. Gabriel Bonfim, for what it's worth, holds his hands really wide apart like it's a boxing stance without the gloves, and he gets hit down the middle. If you go back and watch his last fight on Contender Series, he was on the same card as his brother, and he took on Trey Waters. Trey Waters came in on really short notice for one of the best names in MMA, Felix Klinkhammer. And in that fight, Trey Waters was landing the jab on the outside. Now, Bonfim was touching him up, had his right eye swelled up, ran in for a double leg, got caught in the guillotine, and out of that, used the shoulder pressure to get a Von Prue choke. And we're going to talk a lot about Vince St. Preux on this card because Shogun is on this card.
That time a skateboard got thrown into the cage?
That was wild. But if you do look at it for Gabriel Bonfim, and I go through all of the fights that he had, the one that he had at LFA 126, his opponent weighed 175.8, so he couldn't win the title. He looked really good in that one. He looked great before that with the LFA. And I'll show you, like, in his fights, he's not just taking on striker, grappler. Like, the fight that he had at LFA 112, it was against a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. And I'll put it up on the screen, the combo he was able to land in the second round. This guy goes body, head, and he has such speed and power in these combinations that he kind of catches his opponents off guard. So Gabriel Bonfim, the boxing record. The jiu-jitsu, though, is at the forefront. Boxing, to get it down to the mat, to get it into submission abilities. You look at it for Trevin Giles. Coming into the UFC, this guy was awesome. He had beaten Brendan Allen. He had beaten Ryan Spann. He had also beaten Ike Villanueva. Finished Allen and finished Villanueva. Beat Ryan Spann by split decision. He comes in, finish win after finish win to kick it off, and it went from 185 to now down at 170. And if you look at his last four fights, Dricus du Plessis, he also had the fight against Michael Morales. He fought against Louis Cosi, and Giles last time out against Preston Parsons. It's been really interesting because he was having a lot of success against Dricus du Plessis until he got finished. He was having a lot of success against Michael Morales until he got finished. And his last two against Cosi, who...
Yeah, that's the thing. Trevin Giles was fighting guys who were much higher than the last two opponents, I would say.
But when he took on Preston Parsons, that's a split decision win where I thought Parsons won a couple of rounds in that one. Regardless, it was a close fight. Most people thought it was a close fight, and you'll get chatter from both sides. But for Giles, what he struggled against is if you can really grapple against him, and not many have in the UFC, but if you can really, really get him down and tangle with him, you can really cause him some issues on the mat. And Parsons is able to threaten with a lot of that. Giles has really good submission defense, and that's one of the things that you like to see. He's got that powerful pressure jab. You saw that when he took on, Roman Dolidze. It was great. But for Giles, it's just piecing every bit of his game together when you're taking on some
And that's
of
the
these
Trevin Giles is a good case study on when being well-rounded sometimes becomes a bit of a detriment. Because Trevin Giles can do pretty much everything in MMA, right? Like, he's a good striker, he can wrestle, he has submissions, like, he can do everything. But it has been a case of, like, we said it about Gilbert Burns for how many years? It was, hey, when Gilbert can match the striking with the wrestling and the jiu-jitsu, that's a real dangerous mixed martial artist. And for Giles, when he's the one aggressive, when he's moving forward, really making you feel his physicality with the jab, with the boxing combinations, he has great hand speed, and that was something that did follow him down from 185 to 170. I was a little bit concerned that we were going to lose some of the things that made him special up a weight class because he was a little bit undersized, right? But I think he made it work well for him. He was using the jab, and I understand he lost to Darrius, who was at the top of the division, Morales, who can look really good and then sometimes bad in the same fight even when he wins. So for Giles, it always has been a case of, can he just stick to the things that he does well? I brought it up with Matthew Semelsberger to open this card. The thing I like about Semelsberger is he knows what he does well, he knows what he doesn't do well, he's going to try to avoid the parts of the game that he can't do, and he's going to try to accentuate the things he can do really well. Giles, the weird thing about his grappling is he can get held in positions, and that's what I'm not a big fan of. Even if he can defend that initial takedown attempt, he sometimes can sprawl. Go back to the James Krause fight. James Krause was able to hold him in a lot of different positions.
You mean
The James Krause, not a name we bring up a lot, but he was really able to have success controlling Giles in the mat. And you bring up the submission defense. It is a very important part of his game, but he can still lose minutes and rounds in some of those positions. And that's why I think Bonfim can have success, because you bring up the submission ability. If he gets on top of Giles, I don't think it will be a case of kind of that one hit, one kill, right? Giles is very squirmy on the ground. He moves very well off his back, but Bonfim can use that time to at least control Giles and win moments and win rounds that way.
And we talk about fights like this all the time. So there's one example that pops into my head. The fight that Terrence McKinney had against Sean Woodson over on Dana White's Contender Series. McKinney's winning that fight, and it's down on the mat, and he goes to stand up after Woodson's already popped back up. He eats a knee for his troubles. He gets finished. You look at Trevin Giles' fight against Zach Cummings. Winning the fight. In the third round, gets in at an odd angle, gets caught in a guillotine. That's the end of the fight, and you have a win for Zach Cummings. So 73% takedown defense in the UFC for Trevin Giles, but he's been taken down by Neto BJJ. No, it's Antonio Braga Neto. Where's he been? I don't know. Missing him for all these years. Meerschaert, Krause, Dolidze, Duplessis, and Kosi. And a fight of the night against Krause, as you had mentioned. But Preston Parsons had some takedown success as well. So as good as the takedown defense is for Trevin Giles, he does get taken down a little bit. For Bonfim, good takedowns, good boxing, but the thing that I mentioned in that clip is with Bonfim, his striking defense is choppy. He got hit quite a bit by Lazez on his way in for his troubles to get the fight down to the mat, and you saw it. He pulls guillotine, and then he rolls it, and he's on top, and he gets the submission win. But Bonfim holds his hands really wide, and Trevin Giles doesn't strike. Trevin Giles does strike.
Backs up a lot.
Although it is at low volume, Giles throws a lot of jab, right cross down the middle to where Bonfim keeps his hands wide open, and that could pose a big problem for Bonfim against a guy like Giles in MMA.
You are right, but I think if Bonfim sees the same technique over and over again, it's just going to allow him to start calculating some of his own counters, because if he is able to start slipping the jab of Trevin Giles, you bring it up. Giles is going to pump that jab in your face, but there's not always the right hand coming behind it, and if Bonfim can start to decipher, okay, if I slip this shot and crack him with my own power shot, I just don't know if Giles at 170 is going to have that level of durability. Now, I haven't seen it yet, so I'm not right just because I say it.
The Morales fight.
But Trevin Giles is, he's a big guy. He's fought at 205. He's fought at 185. He is a big guy for this weight class. And I'm always worried when he cuts down to 170. I truly am. Maybe I'm the only person, because he is fighting in his weight class. You can tell that he looks like a big fighter, and he wasn't looking that same way at 185. But those 15 pounds are a very big drop to make. So maybe he pulls a Paul Craig. It makes me look absolutely foolish, but I do think it is a good point to bring up.
Some big time fights on this one, and Bonfim in the fight is a pretty big favorite. We have a look over on Topology. Surprise us there to you. I think they're going to be close-ish.
I think this is a fight of the night. I'm going to say that right now, and this is why. If Bonfim wins, especially by spectacular fashion, I bring up the jab and the counter abilities on purpose. I think Giles is going to be the aggressive party, at least early in this matchup, until Bonfim hits him with a shot that makes him not. That's my prediction.
So I'm going to say over-under 70% Bonfim here.
I think it'll be over, even though personally I have that bar lower.
Holy smokes. I didn't think it was going to be 1,139 total votes, 94% Bonfim, 67% by submission, 17% by knockout for the 6% that have Giles, 72% by decision. If Bonfim can't get this down to the mat, he's a good striker. He's a really good striker. We can't stress this enough. He's a good boxer with a lot of submission wins. But if you look at it, Giles has a method of victory, and I think we made that apparent. I do have Bonfim in the matchup. For the same reason that I picked Preston Parsons to beat Trevin Giles, I think Bonfim, if it goes down, he can not wall install or just hold things in a position, but I do think Bonfim's quite adept with his grappling. For that reason, I do have him to win the fight.
I agree. I bring up that the James Krause fight on purpose. I couldn't remember his name until I put the in front of it. But for Giles, he can get held in some of those spots, and I think he will have a lot of success when he's on the feet. I think we will see a lot of 50-50 striking, just based off the activity and the jab of Giles. But I think eventually Bonfim's either going to land that big power shot or get him to the mat long enough to start threatening with submissions.
Both of us going with Bonfim in the matchup. Some big time fights on this card. As I mentioned, you have Derrick Lewis taking on Marcos Rogerio de Lima. Wonder Boy's taking on Michel Pereira. Some big ones that you're not going to want to miss. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say.
Let's get into it.